Good morning, integrated math. So we're going to go ahead and keep going with solving inequalities. We're going to try and start integrating some multi-step inequalities. So we're going to call this section 3.4, and we're going to try and keep it pretty basic today. I'm going to show you two types of multi-step inequalities and how to solve them. So your Wednesdays and your Fridays homework will be just what we cover in here. The same topics, I mean. Okay, so I'm looking at this inequality, and right off the bat, it probably looks more complicated than ones we've solved in the past. And reason being is I've got multiple terms, not just two things, but I actually have three things. So if you think back to chapter 2, when we solved multi-step equations, we kind of had a series of steps. One thing that we want to look out for if we've got multiple terms like this is if we've got any terms that are called like terms that we can combine. So I have 4x, I have a minus 3, and I have a negative 8x. So this has an x, and this has an x. That means that I can actually combine these two terms because they both have x's. I can't combine it with the minus 3 because that's just a constant. So I encourage you to utilize a calculator when you're doing this because some of the signs, if you're trying to do it in your head, you might accidentally get the wrong answer. This is positive, this is negative, so I'm going to take their difference. 4x minus 8x, if I use my calculator, that's going to give me a negative 4. Okay, you can't do the variables in your calculator, but you just add it on at the end. So this had an x, and so did this, so I need to make sure to include that. I haven't done anything with the minus 3 yet, so I need to make sure to bring that down in my next step. Okay. I also want to make sure that I'm typing my inequality symbol. Let me make sure that this is like this. I'm just going to space it over so that this barrier is still going down the middle. Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm not changing it to an equal sign. If it's a less than symbol, I'm typing a less than symbol. And then the 9 just comes down for the ride. So now it looks more familiar. It looks more like an inequality that we solved in the previous lesson, which is a two-step inequality. I have to undo the number that's not touching the variable first, and then undo what is. Okay, so I need to undo that minus 3 first. The opposite of subtracting 3 is to add it. I do it once to the left and once to the right. These are going to cancel out, and I'll be left with a negative 4x. And I'm going to bring down my inequality symbol. On the right, I have to add these two. If I type that into my calculator, 9 plus 3 should give me 12. The last thing I need to do is I need to take this negative 4x, which is being multiplied, and do the opposite, and that's to divide by negative 4. Backspace one more time. Space over so it looks a little more clear. I'm going to divide by negative 4 here, divide by negative 4 here. Now x is alone, and if you recall, if you multiply or divide, whoops, I forgot my negative here. Let me go back. It should be a negative. If you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip the direction of this inequality. Okay, I tried to put reminders on slides where you're going to have to do that. And then on the right, I simply divide. 12 divided by negative 4 gives me negative 3. There's my final answer. On the slides where you're solving, you're not going to need to do the graph. I've separated the graphs for you on a different slide. So if it says solve, that's all you need to do. So I'm done here. I'm not going to graph my answer. Okay? All right, let's try another one like this. So as you can see, this looks a little more complicated than the ones we did last week. Same reason. I've got multiple terms. Look for things that can be combined. I have a 7. I have a negative 4x, and I have a plus 4. So I've got two things that have no x. I can combine those. They're both positive, okay? The minus sign is going with the x term. So I've got a positive 7 and a positive 4. I'm going to add them together to give me 11. The minus 4x, I haven't done anything with it yet, so it just comes down for the ride. And again, I need to make sure that I'm typing in my symbol. If you want that bar underneath, simply highlight it and select the underline feature, and that'll put the bar underneath. Remember, if it's got a bar, you want to maintain that bar all throughout your work. Okay, now it's a two-step. I have two numbers to undo that are near the x. I need to take care of what's not touching and then take care of what is. This 11 is positive. I want to do the opposite and subtract it from both sides. I still have a minus 4x is greater than or equal to 23 minus 11 is going to give me 12, I believe. I'm just going to double check my mental math using a calculator. 23 minus 11 is in fact 12. I did it correctly. Okay, last step. I need to get rid of this negative 4. It's touching, that means multiplication, so I do the opposite and divide. And again, I divided by a negative. That means that I'm going to need to flip the direction of this inequality. It's still going to have an underline, but I need to flip it because I divided by a negative. And that's going to give me negative 3 when I divide 12 by negative 4. Okay? Let's try another one. This one looks different from the ones we just did. What do you notice that's different? It has parentheses. So when you see parentheses, always distribute first. Remember, when you're distributing, you're taking the number that's touching the parentheses and you're multiplying it to each of the inside terms. So what I need to do in my next step is I need to distribute that outside 8 into each of these terms. I multiply. 8 times 8 gives me 64. Oops. 8 times x gives me 8x. It's still a positive, so I put a plus sign there. I bring down my inequality symbol, making sure that I press underline so it still has a bar underneath, and the 88 comes down for the ride. Now it's a two-step. I gotta take care of what's not touching the variable before I can take care of what is. This 64 is positive, so I do the opposite and subtract. I still have an 8x. Remember, if you have a two-step inequality and you undo that first step, your variable still isn't alone. It still has a number sitting in front, so you gotta make sure that you go all the way and take care of everything. 88 minus 64 is gonna give me 24. And then last but not least, that 8 touching the variable means multiplication. Opposite is going to be to divide. I'm going to divide both sides by 8. X is now alone. And because I didn't divide by a negative, I don't have to flip my symbol, but I do need to maintain that there's still a bar underneath. 24 divided by 8 is going to give me 3. There's my final answer. So sometimes we have to distribute, sometimes we have to combine things, okay? Let's do another example where we distribute. Okay, so solve the inequality. Again, I'm going to take this outside term that's touching the parentheses and distribute, in other words, multiply it into each of the inside terms. Use a calculator. Make sure you're careful with your signs. Negative 3 times 3x gives me negative 9x. Negative 3 times negative 7 gives me positive 21. I'm going to space this over a little bit. And then I copy down my inequality symbol. And then I bring down the 93. Now it's a two-step. I need to undo what's not touching the variable before I can undo what is. To undo a plus 21, I subtract it once to both sides. I still have a negative 9x. I need to bring down my inequality, and then I'm just going to use a calculator here so I don't make a mistake. 93 minus 21 gives me 72. And then to get rid of that -9 that's touching the variable, well, that means multiplication, I do the opposite. I divide both sides by -9. X is now alone. I divided by a negative, so guess what I have to do again? Flip the direction of my inequality. And then 72 divided by -8, or excuse me, -9 is -8. So there's my answer. And that is the last example for our notes. So go ahead and give the practice problems a try on your online learning slides. Don't forget to click turn in when you're ready for me to grade it. And remember, if you get a grade that is anything lower than a 10 out of 10, you're always more than welcome to go back, and I encourage you to do this. Go back, make corrections based off of the feedback that I leave you, and then resubmit it for a higher grade, okay? Always reach out if you have any questions. Take care, guys.